And we are live. Hello, everybody, to this stream on the book Moby-Dick. How is everybody?
Good, thank you.
Great.
Living the dream.
Back again to streaming, so good.
Yeah. Um, Today's topic is Moby-Dick or the Whale. And now, why this name or the Whale? Because it was published in 51, if I recall correctly, and in America it was called Moby-Dick, and in Great Britain it was called The Whale. Yeah.
So this is an early example of Harry
Marketing.
Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah, something like that. Okay.
Well, I think it's properly more titled The Whale, or more properly titled The Whale, because and we'll get into this a little later, but Melville intermixes within his narrative a lot of nonfiction elements, at least nonfiction contemporarily.
Yeah, and to this, in the title of the book is written with a hyphen, and only one other time in the book it's written with a hyphen. Otherwise, it's a space between Moby and Dick. So yeah, a little lore as well. So now let's go into the book. Or Herman Melvin. Anybody got to say something about him?
He was an excellent writer. His prose was very evocative. He used excellent adjectives and adverbs, and he was very descriptive. I thought his scene building and his narration was very well done. I can understand why this is accepted and proclaimed as one of the best books ever written. Certain people think this is the best book ever written, and it's certainly understandable why they might come to that conclusion.
You just like it because it's very long.
Well, contemporarily, this was the primary entertainment medium of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was necessarily much more illustrative, and it had much more descriptive and correlatively longer.
Okay, a little bit about Herman Melville. He was born in quite a wealthy family. He went to good schools, and he was very well versed in the Bible, which comes through in a lot of reference. But his father lost a lot of money, or he spent it too much, and he was a whaler as well, and served on a U.S. Navy ship for a bit, little bit on background to the author. So this is probably the reason why he goes into this depth about whaling and descriptions of the whales, all this kind of business. Anything else?
It seems he has a similar background to Jack London, in that London was actually doing a lot of the things about which he was writing. So it makes sense that Melville would be cut from the same cloth. As writers are frequently told, write what you know.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, on to the next slide. If it won't work. The book Moby-Dick, as Brandon before said, has a very broad influence. So we come to this later, but Starbucks is called after Starbuck, the first mate of the in the book. Then it has a lot of cultural reference. There's a few movies about it. There's also a reference in Citizen Kane. Jason Pollock the painting, is called Moby-Dick as well, and of course a lot of reference in popular culture as The Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad, or Parks and Recreation, and as well I think a song with Led Zeppelin, but I'm not really familiar with this kind of songs.
You're forgetting, of course, the most beautiful movie ever, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
I haven't watched this as well. Okay.
I was thought watching while reading it, the guy out of Jaws was just like ripped straight out of Moby-Dick. With his the way he talked and everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, onto the Nantucket itself. It's for those who aren't from the states as myself. It's in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
Thank you very much. This is satellite photo, and white whale is, and harpoon, and the log is the flag from Nantucket. Then onto the first mates are Starbuck, Stop, and Flask. What can we say about these characters?
Well, they are. They each had a whaling boat. So the ship, the latter part of the story actually is about a whaling ship back when whaling ships were made out of wood. And the way they would hunt whales is that they had separate boats to hunt them, and each of these boats would be led by a first mate and a harpooner. So each of these guys has their own. They own a bit of character. As far as I know, Starbuck is a bit of the voice of reason in the story, as in that he tries to persuade Ahab to stop hunting the white whale, and just that they're actually there to make a profit instead of for vengeance. While it turns out that the captain doesn't really care about profit; he just wants to take revenge.
Well, he almost he almost goes to his emotional side, doesn't he? And almost manages to persuade him to go home. Just right towards the end, but right at the last minute, he's like, no.
And I think all of them and Ahab on itself are Quakers. Does anybody think this plays into the book as well? The Quaker upbringing?
Well, there's certainly allusions to it throughout, and as previously mentioned, Melville was very familiar with the Bible, which was one of the core educational texts of the time, and it was the cornerstone of most religious fundamentalist groups at the time, including the Quakers. And the Quaker ethos is suffused throughout the first third of the book. And there's a lot of splitting of the way that the world should work and the way that the world does work. And Quakers are very insular in their management of themselves, but are very adaptive when it comes to relating with others or necessity. And as a consequence of that, we can see that there's a lot of changes that occur within the context of the Quakers who are on the ship for an extended period of time. One of the other things to be mentioned about the mates is the distinct personalities of the three. Starbuck is, as previously alluded, the straight man, the moral lodestone, if you will. Stubb is irreverent, and if I remember correctly, he was the one who was constantly cracking jokes and making fun of things. And Flask was the taskmaster. He was the guy who was the classic guy with the whip, the cat of nine tails, discipline uber alles.
Okay, maybe Bishop, do you want to, in really short summary, say what the book is about? A short
Try
summary,
me.
maybe a joke for almost 800-page book.
Okay, so we have a narrator called Ishmael who seemingly is telling the story, how he first was working for the mercantile fleet. So he worked on a cargo vessel, and now he wanted to do whaling, which is something completely different. So he goes to Nantucket and tries to find a room to sleep, and after that to find a whaling vessel, but he discovers that there are almost no rooms available, so he has to share a bed with a native of the South Pacific. So that goes on for a while. Then they decide to join up with a whaling vessel called the Pequod, which is being outfitted. It has 3 captains, and you have to see that 2 of these captains are actually not sailing with it, but they're actually kind of part owners, but they stay on shore and they deal with that side of the business. And you have 1 captain who actually is on the ship. That's Captain Ahab, and you don't see Captain Ahab until they have sailed, and this is kind of suspicious, but he goes along with it anyways. And it turns out that Captain Ahab has lost his leg up to the knee to a white whale called Moby-Dick, and he's hell bent on taking revenge. So he he sets a reward for the first person who sees him, and you basically discover quite quickly that he wants to hunt and kill this whale. So they travel around the world. The typical voyage for these ships would be 3 to 4 years, if I understand it correctly. And so they meet a lot of other ships, and Ahab becomes more and more focused on hunting the whale. And at some point they meet this whale, this Moby-Dick, and he destroys all the ships, and he destroys the Pequod itself. And Ishmael, the narrator, is the only survivor.
Okay.
And lots of information about whaling, whales,
Yes.
and boats in between.
So all the stuff you would normally know from the Discovery Channel or the History Channel or from something else is compressed into this book, because when it was written, you didn't have any movies, so the only way you actually knew all this kind of couleur locale to description of what a town looked like, what a ship looked like, and how to basically process a whale down to candles. That's basically all described in this book.
Yeah, maybe something.
In other
to
words,
mention
all
is-
we need is a ship.
We need
Yeah.
a ship and a couple of harpoons, and we're on our way, mateys.
Yeah, and the reason why they're whaling is because they need the spermaceti, which is basically oil to light lanterns and feeding the newly industrialized machine, which is coming up in America and Great Britain at that time.
Yeah, so for
Obviously,
all the teenagers in our audience, the word sperm really, what they thought was that the fat inside of the head of the sperm whale was its sperm, so that's why they call it like that. So this word
Mhm.
is quite a lot in this book, which is called Moby-Dick. So take your pick when you read it. But yeah, back then you didn't have like all the artificial oils that we make from crude oil, which
triffids.
that's why we needed triffids. So that's why they were whaling. And then later on we found these plants, and no, not triffids. So nowadays we make oil from crude oil, which we get from reservoirs underground. But back then the only way to get good oil was from fish and from whales.
And they used to use every last bit of the fish, from its
Yeah.
bones to its skin to its oils to its meat.
Yeah, this was I was asking when they tied one of the whale they captured to the boat, and I think Starbuck made the black chef lecture to the whales, to the whale carcass and to the sharks in the water. It reminded me as kind of the political landscape nowadays, which some people are forced to lecture to other people. But yeah.
Yeah, that was an amusing little aside when he was preaching to the sharks.
Okay. Now,
It's
Yep.
generally considered one of the major things that John D. Rockefeller did was save the sperm whales as a species with Standard Oil, because the amount of whaling that was going on at the time was massive, and while a lot of the whale was used, a lot of the whale was not used. In fact, they were getting to the point where they were just industrialized, as was described in the book, killing a whale, stripping it of its outer layer of blubber, and then just dumping the rest. There was not a lot of effort made to recover the what do you call it, the meat or the bones or any of that, because the actual pound for pound, hour for hour value of the external layer of blubber was so much greater than the rest of the whale that they just filled up on that and dumped all the rest into the ocean.
Yeah, and to mention, for one complete boat to head back, they have to kill at least 40 whales, which is giant amount. Okay, I think we go to the next slide, which will be the main character, Ishmael. The book opens with the not so foreboding line, "Call me Ishmael." So, what do you think about main character, so to speak, or one of them?
Well, he's really the main character in the third part of the book. And then he kind of disappears to the background. He becomes like basically the observer, because the rest of the book is just between all the people on the ship. So
yeah, you almost forget who's narrating when you get towards the end.
So it's a bit of an odd structure where normally you have a main character that is there throughout the book and who has a story arc. And here he has a story arc as in that he's the survivor of the ship, but this was only a chapter that was added later because people were confused how a ship where everybody died could have somebody narrating what happened. So yeah, structure-wise, this is a bit of an odd book, and that was also one of the critiques they had back then when they published it. As a person, yeah, he starts out a bit as an everyman, as in he's new to the situation, so everything has to be explained. And at first he's quite reluctant about some things, and then a couple of chapters in, he doesn't mind actually sleeping with another guy in a bed. So
Perfect sailor.
yeah.
But also he is a sailor, isn't he? But he's not a whaler.
No.
So he has to
No,
kind of warm up to him.
They're laughing at him when he joins the Pequod or wants to join, like, oh, you're from the mercantile fleet, and then they laugh like, yeah, this is completely different.
But he has another guy with him who's pretty good at whaling, so let him on.
Yeah, there's very little detailed about Ishmael's job and his actions when he's on the Pequod. Prior to his being on the Pequod, he's the narrative anchor of the story, and he's the narrator and the protagonist. But once he actually sets sail in the Pequod, then they transition the narrative to focus primarily on the mates and the captain. And fundamentally, all of the previous characters fade into the background and have occasional call-outs, but rarely.
Yeah, well, he's got nothing to kind of relate to, has he? He's not got a family, or he's not got kids, or there's no setup with him, really.
Yeah, he doesn't have an anchor.
He's just some guy. So yeah, which is probably why you kind of forget about him.
Yeah, in other parts of the book, he goes into great details about the whale and all this kind of stuff. For me, the narrator voice changed a little bit from him first person to him just, or something similar to a scientific paper where you just describe the topic, but you have to still see it to Ishmael's eyes, which gets lost at one point. And he isn't really the main character in the book. He's just a keen observer to the whole Moby-Dick story. He's not more and not less.
Yeah, they kind of towards the end, you kind of feel like Starbucks almost, supersedes him.
Okay, now we'll come to the real main, or his companion, Queek.
Queequeg.
What do you have to say
Queequeg.
about him? Yeah, Queek.
Apparently, he's
Interesting,
a cannibal, which is the big area. That's the big thing, and whether he's actually a cannibal or not is never really detailed in the book. It's entirely possible that this is all tall tales that are told to make him appear more fearsome than he actually is, and stuff of that nature. One thing that is well established is he is massively tattooed, and he is also a giant. And Apparently, he's also the son of a king.
Well, he was carrying around like shrunken heads at the beginning of the book, so that doesn't make him necessarily a cannibal, but there's definitely something to him.
Yeah, that I don't know anything about shrunken heads. I'm guessing it was a fad at a time or something. I don't know. That's one of those things that's lost to history. But
Yeah, no.
apparently they were quite valuable and trade goods that were sold out around Nantucket. So
Yeah. And the other point, he's I think from Polynesia or something to that, which might explain why he has a Maori tattoo, something to that effect. And he gets paid more than Ishmael. Ishmael gets paid something 170 from the whatever the profit is from the ship, and Kuek makes about 133rd, about that amount. So you could talk about pure meritocracy simply because Kuek is the harpooner and is more important. To killing a whale, therefore getting the oil than Ishmael.
Yeah, he has his own spear and everything that he takes with him, doesn't he?
Yes.
Was there something special about it? It was kind of odd. I can't quite remember that bit now. Anyway.
I don't remember that there was anything particularly special about it, other than it was his, and he sharpened it religiously. So he treated it almost with totemic devotion, and he also had an idol he worshipped as well, which was his effigy for his particular religion, to which he sacrificed little bits of biscuit and whatnot. So. He was clearly not a Christian, and then that was an issue with the two captains who were in the dock when the ship was in the bay at Nantucket. Before the Pequod shipped out, they said they didn't want anyone who was a non-Christian, and then Ishmael said, "Well, he's a member of the First Congregational Church, of course, First Church of Christ." And they're like, "Oh, really? Yeah, he's a deacon in that church." And it's like, "Oh, well, I'm sorry, I apologize." And it's like, where does this church meet? Who are its members? And how? Tell me of the congregation. And he's like, it's the first church into which every man is born. Don't you know? We're all members of that church, even the heathens and the unbelievers, etc." And basically, he made a little bit of a sophistic argument there and convinced them to go in the direction they wanted to go already, because Queequeg was a very, very good harpooner.
So he basically was hired because he had a friend with skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and talking about Kuek, Ishmael, or by extension, Melville makes a little bit, let's say, laxing attitude with the Ten Commandments, something to love your neighbor, and your neighbor is a pagan, and therefore love your pagan neighbor who isn't a Christian. So you have to worship their gods as well, which is clearly against the Ten Commandments. And you shall have no gods before me. So that's kind of subversive.
Yeah, the whole story surrounding that was very laden with sophistry, and I think that was part of Melville's poking fun at the churches of the time, who were primarily focused on form rather than function. So as long as you were able to find a narrative thread you could follow, fundamentally everything could be justified, which is clearly wrong on the face of it.
Do we have anything to say about him, or are we going to the next character?
Yeah, move on. Yeah.
So, what can we say about Captain Ahab?
He's
Insane.
obsessed. Yeah.
I wouldn't say he was insane. He was really obsessed.
Hmm.
So, well, maybe insane is the right word. But there were moments that he was reasonable, and then there were moments that he basically was just focused on revenge and nothing else.
Yeah.
There's an example where they have casks of oil in their hold, which they when after they processed, and these were leaking, and he didn't want to check it out. Well, what they should do is check out which cask was leaking, because otherwise it would cost them a lot of money. And then Starbuck tries to convince him, or knows to convince him, or convinces him to basically send people into the hold and find the leak. So yeah.
Well, the main reason why he didn't want to do that was because they would have to stop, actually take their time, take it all out, like repair it, and he just wanted to keep hunting the whale.
Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently he didn't care about losing like a whale's worth of oil a day as long as he could keep chasing the whale, which that is not exactly what the people set him out for on the journey, in the least.
But he could be reasonable along with it as well, though, couldn't he? Even though he was obsessed, like when the compass gets messed up and they've been heading in the wrong direction, and you kind of feel like he could have flipped and gone crazy at them, but he kind of laughed it off, and it was like no big deal, we've been going in the wrong direction. And then it has quite a few pages describing how magnets work.
Yeah, and onto this, he has the skill to navigate without, or at least he tries with, or he does navigate without tools, which I cannot imagine a modern captain doing.
Yeah, what's the section?
Actually, there's a lot of stuff with that is very much the modern thing. There's a requirement for modern captains to be able to navigate using the stars and sextants and etc.
Okay.
What's the device that they hold for the navigation? There's a bit where he's describing, in like a negative light. I can't remember what it says about it now, but it was quite profound, I guess.
Sextant.
Yeah, and it's the way he's describing it in like a really negative manner when he's holding it. Or is it Starbuck that describes it? I can't remember now, but yeah, I should have written that down. So it was quite.
How much would you say he's maniacal, or just really driven to kill that whale, or is there a dividing line?
Well, he because he has a new wife back home, doesn't he? Who got pregnant just before he left the last time, and then he comes back, sees his kid for like 5 minutes, and then he's off again, which is this journey. And it does kind of mention that, and Starbuck uses that to try and get him to call off his vendetta against the whale, and it almost kind of works, but then last minute he. He's like, no, couldn't possibly. Which I guess was kind of the norm then, just, getting a wife, having a kid, and then buggering off for a few years.
Yeah, that was actually very common at the time in the 1800s with the ship trade. Travel was fraught with danger and with long voyages. So a merchant sailor would be out for multiple years with their ship, and the home port wouldn't know whether that ship was actually going to be ever coming back or not that entire time.
Yeah, I read somewhere that about 1/4 of the sailors' wives are widowed. So that means that their husband died at sea, which is a giant amount if you think about it. Is there anything similar to profession where 1/4 dies?
Well, apparently, is it the most dangerous profession you can still do? It's the deep sea fishing, isn't it? I think in terms of fatalities, it's one of the most dangerous things. Obviously, anything involving the sea is pretty dangerous. I know the deep sea divers who, they work in the pods on the bottom of the seabed and kind of breathe off like a helium mixture or something. That's it's extremely high paid. Yeah, because just generally, if the sea is involved, it's unpredictable and dangerous. And I suppose if you chuck in giant whales along with that, it's going to be amplified.
Is there anything left to say about Captain Ahab besides his maniac?
Well, I think the kind of thing is that he's also a very competent person. Like, I think that was kind of reflected in him just instantly noticing that the compasses were off. But also just in general, it's not some kind of crazy person they can just cast to the side. He is the captain of the ship. He is in charge, and that creates a lot of interesting conflict throughout the book that they can't just toss him to the side because he's acting all crazy.
And he knows when to. He knows when to give the men a little something to kind of keep them on side as well, doesn't he? To stop them mutinying or whatever.
Yeah, Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point about him being competent and very good at his job. He's a veteran. He's been on a lot of these cruises, and he's been very successful in the past, as well as he's also a consummate professional when it comes to understanding the motivations of his crew, because every time they go out, they basically get an entirely different crew of hands. The mates are frequently the same, but the hands tend to change over very frequently. And it's a mercenary crew, so his primary method of convincing them to be on his side versus Starbucks side is he makes emotional and financial appeals to them, and he's very, very good at sophistry and very good at giving speeches to inflame the passions of his men.
Yeah, definitely.
One last thing about him was toward the tail end of the book, he commissions a special harpoon made that is fundamentally about the most blasphemous and evil harpoon that can be made possible. Basically, he condemns, he commends it to Satan and all the rest of that stuff, and he says a whole bunch of things of that nature, which again is possibly hearkening back to the religious overtones Melville made throughout and the allusions to the Bible Melville made throughout the book. And at that point, you could basically see that he's going to wind up with a bad end. And
regarding the harpoon, let's go to the target of this whole operation, the whale or Moby-Dick. How much is the story an extended story of Jonah and the whale? Or what do you think? Because spoiler, I guess, is Ahab gets dragged by the sea, by the whale, by the neck to the ground of the sea. So I think there's you can definitely make a comparison with Jonah and the whale, and there's a whole sermon about Jonah and the whale, which is quite beautiful, written, and made me, in preparation for this, reread that passage in the Bible, which is the sermon in the book fluffs it up a little bit, but I could see how it would have been going down like that. So
Yeah, that was quite early on, wasn't it, with the priest and the.
Yeah, the priest in the church was very, very well done. I liked all of the subtleties that Melville to which Melville alluded, because it was very, very well done. I thought the preacher was understandably popular and popular with his parishioners for a reason. He did a good job of highlighting the core point of that, and the various allusions to the responsibilities one gains with greater knowledge and greater understanding, how they're concomitant. As to the actual whale itself, I think Moby-Dick was an allusion to an actual whale. There was a whale that learned how to fight back against whaling boats at the time. I'm not going to say. Go ahead.
I thought the prevailing theory was that it was a whale that confused the boat with people like hammering something on it with a like competing rival whale. I thought that was the prevailing theory, but I read this like a while back, so I don't actually remember it.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. I only read about that in passing, but my understanding is there was some whale, and I don't know that there was a lot of documentation about it for obvious reasons, because if the whale were as effective as whales can be at attacking vessels like this at the time, then survivors were not necessarily likely to be around. So it's possible that some of the better accounts were lost at sea along with the men who could have given them.
Yeah, you were unlikely to get picked up. Let's face it.
If the main ship goes down, there's very little likelihood of you being able to be rescued, because by their nature, whales have a tendency to stay way the hell away from land.
Yeah, I enjoyed that Ishmael, only survived because he was clinging to a coffin. That was quite apt.
A coffin from his friend, no less, which was made originally for him, but he decided to not die, so he wouldn't use it. But he died anyways. But sorry, yeah.
Which is the bit of the ship they replaced with the coffin? What was that? Its name?
Life Buoy.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I can't remember what it did, but yeah.
It's basically a life preserver, a floating ring that you throw to people.
Yeah, that drags on the back of the ship, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's designed to be dropped in the event that there's a man overboard and you can't go back for him. So you just cut that and it falls into the ocean, and they can swim over to it and catch it and hang on.
And what about Moby-Dick? Is he symbolize he something in the book, or is he just a stupid fucking fish, as Parks and Recreations, I think John Swanson says, or is there a deeper meaning behind the fish? Or
well, as with all things, the meaning is what one puts into it. I'm fairly certain Melville wanted there to be a deeper meaning, but that deeper meaning was overlaid on the actual fish. As Lizard pointed out, the fish was probably, and it shouldn't be called a fish, it's a cetacean, which is an entirely different genus. But anyway, the whale was probably just demonstrating superiority in mating behavior, and that was why they were attacking the boats. Or they mistook a particularly large orca for a sperm whale, and that orca had a tendency to recognize the boats as seals because it had particularly bad eyesight or something. It's 6 of one, half dozen the other.
Yeah, it's quite recently that's been happening, hasn't it? Around Europe, the orcas have been, sinking ships, particularly carrying certain people. Apparently.
Now.
Before we are banned from YouTube, let's move on to the next subject. Well, you could see that Moby-Dick is basically
It's the Illuminati.
no. It's a MacGuffin. So basically, Moby-Dick isn't there until the final 3 chapters or something. He's basically an object of desire, and this desire, one man's desire, destroys the whole ship. And even although everybody could have stopped Captain Ahab from the beginning, everybody's kind of from the moment that he nails the doubloon to the mast, they are actually like enamored by his obsession. They play into it, and only Starbuck is kind of the voice of reason, to the point that Starbuck almost wants to kill the captain in order to save them from this disaster, this potential disaster. So
yeah, he's waiting outside his room, isn't he?
Yeah, so the story is about one man's obsession and how that can take everybody around him down, and that's what literally happens, and it also takes him down into the depths.
Mass
I mean, they also at some point ran into a captain that himself had, I think, lost his arm. I don't exactly remember, but they ran into one captain that had also lost something to the white whale, and that captain was essentially like, why on earth are you still chasing that whale? Didn't he take enough of you? And I think
that's the captain of the Rachel. That's so the structure of the book is that they meet these other whaling vessels, and then they exchange information. And every time Ahab asks, "Have you seen the white whale?" And that's the only thing he really cares about. And so they meet all these ships, including one ship which is the Bachelor, which is full of sperm or spermaceti. Relax there, juveniles. And the other one is the Rachel, which the captain has lost his son because his son was on one of the whaling boats, and they are looking for his son. So he stopped hunting and is trying to look what he had lost instead of taking revenge.
No, the Rachel and the ship that escaped from Moby-Dick with the captain losing his arm were different ships.
Oh, okay. So, but yeah, there's this narrative structure where they keep meeting these ships, and it's constantly a contrast between what's happening on the Pequod and this other ship. There's also this one ship where there's this preacher, which has taken over the captain can't get rid of him because then everybody will rebel on the ship. So he basically has to deal with the fact that he has an obsessed man that has taken control of his crew, which is basically also what Ahab is doing. Or he's suffering from the same thing, but then in different shape, because he's the obsessed. He is the one with the obsession. So
you also kind of. Sorry, Karen.
So yeah, I have all these ships which basically mirror the situation of the Pequod against what would be happening in another ship if they weren't in the same situation.
Yeah, one of the things that tickles my funny bone is the fact that the ship that said, well, by God, why would you want to possibly pursue that beast, was a British ship. The captain was British, and he was like, what are you talking about? I survived, the ship survived, let's go off and do our job. Stiff upper lip and all that. Cheerio.
Yeah, well, you kind of get a bit of a glimpse into what I assume the author thought of different nations, people from different nations. Like, seemed to quite like the British. Didn't particularly care for the French.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Even the French don't care for the French.
No,
Yeah.
But the scene with the French captain and the translator and stuff that I found that quite amusing.
Was that French or Italian?
No, that was French.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, he would say something horrible to him, and the translator would just say, "Yeah, let's just go home." This guy says we should go home, and he's just telling him he's an idiot. Yeah, I found that amusing. Yeah. And there was quite a few references to the Dutch in there as well, wasn't there? I think. Yeah.
Possibly.
They were the main three, kind of feel.
Yeah, how much do you guys think that Ahab is an American archetype that's just this grandiose man that pursues his target or desire for everything he can, and is is prepared to sacrifice everything in his way, or himself as well, which is kind of, or and is this the building spirit of America?
I wouldn't go so far as to call him an Americanized icon, although I can certainly see how people from other countries might make that connection. It's more of a classical archetype of not an anti-hero, I guess. Not so much a hero, tragic hero, I guess is probably a better way of putting it, because the person who sacrifices everything in pursuit of a particular goal is a trope that has been around since the time of Homer. And it never comes to a good end for that particular heroic character. All of those plays, sonnets, etc., pertaining to that are basically allusions against that, and approbations against that. Beware, do not go, do not pursue to this level, because even if you achieve it, it's not going to be what you want, and it's not going to give you the fulfillment you seek. And in this case, it's basically going to lead directly to your destruction.
And everybody around him as well.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking about the American ethos and the Americanization, I think that what you're seeing the author express more readily in that direction is the Nantucket area, and possibly the Bachelor. I think the Bachelor was an American ship. Basically, the comparison between the Nantucketer, who was the envy of the whaling world, and how the Nantucketer was basically an ethos rather than a race or an ethnicity, because anyone could be a Nantucketer. They were going through Nantucket. He was pointing out how certain people were this way and certain people were that way, and while some were native Nantucketers, the native Nantucketers were not all 100% white or 100% Dutch or whatever. It was basically people who went out to Nantucket and said, "Screw you, the rest of the world. This is my island. I'm living here, and I'm going to make it good." And this is iTunes pointed out earlier. That's a crappy little spit of land. If you look at it from a satellite picture, it's garbage.
Yeah, it's literally just a sandbank in the sea, a few miles off the mainland of the United States. It's not more and not less.
It's kind of described like that in the book as well, isn't it?
That does kind of sound like Captain Ahab's obsession with the whale as well. Like, screw you, I'm going to take down this whale. And then everyone is like, but that's incredibly stupid. And like the same with like the little sand patch in the middle of nowhere. Like, oh, that's going to be my home. And then everyone is like, why would you want to make it so? And I'm like, well, I do. It's maybe a bit of a similarity there.
Yeah, so, the stubborn to the point of stupidity is also classic. I guess the only thing that differentiates when it's benefit or detriment is the actual ultimate conclusion. So if Ahab had killed Moby-Dick and had turned him into oil, then there'd be a different story. But he didn't.
Yeah. And I think what gets lost as well is hunting whales, as in the prefix of the books. Whales are gigantic. They are the biggest creature on planet Earth. So in meters, that would be around 30 meters or 100 foot, which is basically, or is the Leviathan on planet Earth. And hunting this or making extra old one and extra large one as you are arch nemesis is striking, to say the least.
I don't think sperm whales get up to 30 meters.
Or I think
They're
blue
closer
whales,
to
sorry.
like 16. Yeah, but blue whales, they don't hunt. That's even mentioned in the book, that blue whales swim too fast for them to keep up with.
Yeah.
So
And
the
I
real
think they
massive leviathans, they can't really take down.
And I think the oil from blue whale isn't as pure or as high grade as the from pot whales. This is why they hunt them, or spermaceti, why they hunt them preferably, as far as I understood.
Yes. Yeah. The blue whale is the largest living creature on the planet at the moment. It's possible it was always the largest living creature on the planet, but there's argument about the giant squid possibly being bigger, but that's doesn't really matter one way or the other. But to your point about the Leviathan and the ultimate creature on the planet, fighting it and making it your nemesis, that's exactly right. In fact, Peterson goes into that a lot, pertaining to his analysis of Jonah and the whale and Jungian archetypes and yada yada yada.
Yeah, and I think still those men on the shipping boats are truly great men. I mean, going onto a ship which you have no idea if it's successful, you hope so. You go on a journey that's lasting up to 3 years, maybe longer, maybe shorter. You go around the world, which they encountered Moby-Dick, I think in close to Japan, don't they?
I think so, yeah. At least in Asia.
Yeah, in Asiatic waters, so they come from America, and they sailed across the world basically to just hunt a white whale. This is truly great. I mean,
There was a big payoff as well, though. You know, if it had all gone well.
Well, it would have to be.
As I mean, though, there can't have been that much room for big payoffs.
Or at least you hope, or you get dragged down to the depth of the sea and die.
Well, but I think still for people, it's at least nowadays with our cushy lives, it's almost impossible to imagine what it would be like to actually hunt one of those whales. Like those creatures, because for people that haven't read the book, they like harpoon them and then there's a rope attached. At least nowadays you would imagine like, oh, you just have a massive like motor, just hook it up and your big ass ship, it just lifts it out of the water, no problem. But back in those days, that whale, if it really was determined to swim down, it would pull down the entire boat with it. If like the rope got caught or something. Like it's, at least I cannot imagine the kind of force by which such a whale would move through the water. Like, I think at some point they're talking about like being moved like half a mile in like almost no time just because a whale is trying to get away.
Yeah, and they're, as you see on this picture, they're small, and of course it's dramatized and not real, but the whale is gigantic, and they kill them with a, in comparison, tiny harpoon, and they stab through the blubber and all this thick skin into its heart or lung to puncture it and kill him, basically. Nowadays, what do you do for your food? You go to the grocery store. That's all.
Well, they don't even do it really for food. They do it to make candles.
Yeah.
And creams.
Yeah, and at one point that they say the whaler bring civilization to everything, or and one point we sail to bring light to the cities, something to that account.
And they're absolutely right. You know, this was the peak and the apex of civilization at the time. This was the most technologically advanced, the most highly functioning the most industrialized, and the most broadly beneficial industry at the time. This was prior to electricity. This was prior to the adoption of heavy mechanization in industry and manufacturing. This was prior to the Industrial Revolution, or rather, basically concomitant with the Industrial Revolution. But one of the core features at the time was this had to be done on the ocean, and the ocean didn't have steel ships. They hadn't developed them yet, so it was all wooden hulls. And as everyone who ever did anything in a wooden hulled ship is aware, fire is your enemy. So you couldn't have steam engines, you couldn't have gunpowder and black powder cannons and stuff of that nature. That was all military technology, and even the military was very, very, very careful with how they handled that, as was alluded to in extreme detail in the Horatio Hornblower series. So,
and even today, fire on even steel ships is a gigantic problem, and navies or whatever do they go to great extent to limit fire on ship, because it can't sink even a steel ship. So yeah,
even if it doesn't sink it, it'll kill everybody on board. So it's just. So yeah, this was peak technology. So these guys were very specialized and very good at their trades, which is why they were paid commensurate with their abilities.
yeah. Well, this maybe sounds strange, but in the first part of the book, you could almost feel it being a vibrant society, even with how it describes the foreigner as a quick. He's foreign, and he's distinctly.
Distinctly.
Yeah, thank you very much. You can tell he's foreign, but still he somehow integrates as being a foreigner into the society he lives in, and he doesn't lose that he's from a foreign place, but he still can work in a Christian nation, which is kind of incredible if you think about it.
Well, it's cosmopolitan in the core
Yeah.
sense of the word.
Isn't Ishmael concerned initially when he takes into the ship that his colour's going to be an issue?
I think so. I don't recall precisely, but I do know that it is an issue, and that he addresses the issue by basically saying that he's a very skilled harpooner, as it were, and he also demonstrates his skill by throwing his harpoon into basically, I think it was a knot in the main mast that was about the size of a hand span. So,
and he gets very well paid for that. So, as I mentioned before, he gets paid a lot more, about 5 times more than Ishmael,
who is just a sailor and not a whaler.
Yeah. So you could say really they get paid on their skill and nothing else.
a true meritocracy.
Indeed.
Yeah, sometimes things just have to work.
Yeah.
And that's one of the core things, is that the closer you get to things having absolutely no wiggle room, the higher and higher the threshold for actual true meritocracy.
Yeah, there's not too many things left like that.
No, we're becoming too technologically advanced for that.
You kind of think, oh, well, maybe the military is the last place where, meritocracy really, has to be the case. But then you kind of watch the news and think, oh, maybe it's not.
Yeah. The military has to be efficient if it goes to war, but or with an equal foe. But if the military doesn't go to war with an equal foe, it doesn't get tested. And so speaking, America hasn't had a equal foe for maybe
Since World War
Cold
II.
War. Yeah.
Mm. And
Even
still
in the
like
Cold War, I
drugs.
don't think there was an equal foe, because despite all of the propaganda, the Soviet military was massively technologically inferior to the U.S. military and the German military.
Yes. But Russia has always the advantage that it has a giant landmass A, so you have B, a giant population, which was comparatively to the US, I think. So they could just use them as they did in the Second World War, just send wave after wave after wave, which I presume wasn't the strategy that the Americans wanted.
Yeah, which was that big tank battle that they had with the Germans, and the rate, I can't remember now, but the rate that the Russians were chucking out tanks, you know, they didn't bother to put bearings in them or anything because they knew they wouldn't last long enough. Whereas the German tanks were all very well made, you know, with nice bearings, and yeah, but they just got blown to bits. But because the Russians could, you know, churn them out so fast because they were, you know, less sophisticated, they managed to win.
Yeah.
You meant Battle Kursk?
Could be.
It's a metal box with wheels and a gun.
I just remember it was a big tank battle, but I can't remember the name of it. The Russians won.
Was this a Moby-Dick? I must have missed that part.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whale
Around
versus
the time
tank.
when they started introducing the Panzer III, like that's roughly in the part where the book where it starts to like intertwine with World War II Bishop. I don't know how you missed that part, but it was kind of like vital to the plot.
Must have been asleep during that part of the book.
It was buried in his catalog of citations. That's probably why he missed it.
Oh yeah. This book has lists about citations where in traditional literature or classic literature whales are mentioned, and he even mentions that this would be the result of a bad librarian or poor librarian, and it kind of reads like that. Like, yeah, okay, it's just a bunch of citations. Great, that's 15 pages.
And a lot of the stuff he mentions about whales is like, well, this is what we think, but we're not quite sure. Or, you know.
Yeah, but even for that standard, it was pretty high definition or high detailed for having no genetics and all this kind of stuff and ages behind you for observing those. I mean, his interest mainly is just killing them for the whale fat or oil, but describing them in a maybe as a nature or nature catalog or something like that, only to hunt them is to a great extent is kind of fascinating to me, at least.
There was there was also like an entire chapter on Moby-Dick's color as well, wasn't there?
Well, there were chapters on bloody everything pertaining to whales, and he had an entire genealogical history. He had a family tree. He had relationships, and this was basically a 50% nonfiction and 50% narrative story.
Yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could knock the narrative story down to probably less than a third of the book, couldn't you?
If you edited out the parts you didn't need, yes, probably.
Yeah, you could trim this book massively. But would it technically add or take away from the book in its core essence? What do you guys think?
I'd leave it all in. Yeah. There's not enough information about whales in it.
Yeah, I would say, like, I quite like the whale facts. Like, I think you would actually lose quite a bit by leaving that all out there. Even
if they're over 100 years out of date. Yeah.
We could invert it. Just cut out all the story parts. Just have whale facts.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to take a look at the state of knowledge at the time, because this was done primarily. If it was done at all, I expect it was done primarily by captains of whaling ships or people who paid captains of whaling ships for passage and or quote unquote naturalists.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know quite a bit about a thing to kill it effectively, I guess.
Well, not really. You need to know a lot about a certain part of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you need to know where its organs
Where
are, I
it
guess.
keeps its importance.
Yeah.
That's why the T 800 has detailed files on human anatomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, the description of the whales were highly accurate, in my opinion. But the only flaws that they all the time makes is acquaint the whale to being a fish, with it's not. I don't know the English word for it, since I'm not that technically versed in English.
It's a mammal.
Yeah, mammal and vertebrae, something having a spine.
Vertebrate.
Back then, they hadn't made the classification like we do nowadays. So
Yeah.
for them, it was a fish with lungs because it swims in the sea and it looks like a fish. But he does note that the tail is different, and that in some literature they use the wrong tail. So
It's a horizontal as opposed to vertical.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that tells you basically everything you need to know about the fish, because the whales and other air-breathing mammals that live in the ocean are primarily concerned with their vertical component. They care about getting to and from the surface of the water because that's where the air is.
Mhm.
Whereas the other fish are more concerned about the horizontal component. They need to go to where the food is underwater.
There was a lot of surmising in it as well, wasn't there, about the purpose of the blowholes? Discussion about blowholes. I think it comes back to it quite a few times.
Yeah,
again, teenagers is not what you think.
Yeah, Darwin's Origin of the Species got published 8 years later in 1859. So even for that stand, in my opinion, he was highly sophisticated in the classifications for the animal, or for the whales. But still. Anything
next
else?
slide.
Yep. Or do you guys want anything to add about Moby-Dick or whales in general, or the
Whales
quote?
are awesome. Let's just say that.
Okay, next slide then.
Yeah, they saved the world in Star Trek 4.
Actually, that's Star Trek 1. Well, Star Trek 4 as well, but then Star Trek 1.
Star Trek 4 is the whale one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So what they need? They have feature in Star Trek 1, right? Oh, yeah. I'm mixing them up. Not a big
Nuclear
fan of
vessel.
Star Trek 4.
The one about nuclear vessels.
6 was a good one. Like Shakespeare in the original Klingon.
Okay. Should we do at one point something about Star
Trek?
Star Trek, yes.
Not especially.
Nah, I'm not interested.
It's just luxury space communism is not something with which I'm terribly enamored.
Okay, about Moby-Dick and its popularity. When it first got published, the public was very unimpressed. It sold fewer than 4,000 copies, and fewer than 600 in the United Kingdoms. And in general, Herman Melville was during his lifetime, except his first book, wasn't that popular in general. But in the 1920s and 1930s, with the peak in the 1950s, the book got revived, and as well, or especially Moby Dick got revived, and Melville as well. So his books are quite popular, as you see on the chart I have here. Both spelling types with hyphen and without, and without it peaked in the 1950s and went down a little bit. How did you like the books in general? Or do you have anything about critical points about it?
Well, as I said earlier, it's an excellent, extremely well written book. It's very entertaining. It paints a very vivid picture of the whaling industry back in the 1800s. And I can certainly understand why it was considered to be one of the best works of fiction in history. There's a lot of heavy meaning in a lot of the areas of it, and it does a very good job of contextualizing everything. But going back to it, he has a very Dickensian method of writing that illustrates things very well. So I thought it was very well done. I would recommend reading this book, even though I would also suggest that if one is not particularly dedicated or has a lot of time, one can skip the sections on cetacean classification.
But you are a cop out if you do that. I particularly enjoyed the chapters on white.
The man from Clue, or
No, there was 2 chapters, wasn't there? There's a whole chapter on white things that are good, and then a whole chapter on white things that are bad.
how modern.
Found that quite amusing into today's contexts. Although there was quite a lot of stuff that would fit quite well into a nice Netflix series, especially towards the start of the book.
Yeah, that is true. But then again, they are sailors, so
Yeah.
What happens on the ocean stays on the ocean.
yeah, all that.
A man's got to do what a man's got to do. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some weird parts about Moby-Dick being a celebration or something to that kind of gay marriage. It's like, I didn't think you can read into it. At one part, Ishmael and Quek are married together, but I think, as Melville would see it, a savage marriage and a marriage between a savage and as he himself describes him, and Ishmael isn't the same thing as a quote unquote Christian Mary. So yeah,
there were unions of like pirates and stuff as well, wasn't there? They like to trot that all out. But it was all just so if one of them died, the other co-owner of the bounty or whatever got their share.
And let's just say I haven't been in the army, but I have a lot of stuff. The army is the gayest stuff without being gay, or you do a lot of gay stuff without it being gay. And if there's a gay, it escalates quite quickly. But yeah.
Just remember, friends are friends, but buddies sleep together.
Yeah, something to that effect. So
you're not my buddy, guy.
Yeah,
You're not my guy friend.
Yeah, freelance bishop, what do you have to say about this book?
It's quite wordy. It has letters. It has a few pictures in the back, which I discovered at the end when I was finished, and they're of ships and whales. Basically, how to deconstruct one. And actually, I was like, I didn't know that I liked it until I was finished, because then I saw basically what the brilliance was with the structure and how it is built. It is a bit of a book for people who like facts. So if you're looking for a compelling love story, then this is not a book for you.
Yeah, facts are good.
Yeah, Mr. Lizard just left us because of his spotty internet, but I think he likes the book as well. Well, in my opinion, it's a very drawn out book. It took me forever to read. I'm still not finished, but I listened to the audiobook as well to speed things up. It's really well written, but you need a lot of time to read it, a lot of time to calculate that in if you're trying. And I think everything is better than the book we had to read beforehand, and we do not speak of, isn't that true?
That is true.
Okay, good. Anything else you wanted to say about should you read it or should you not read it? Is there an age you should read it, or if you go to C?
It's not a book
Yeah,
for vegetarians or people who like Greenpeace, because it's
yeah,
quite brutal towards animals. So
yeah. It's not particularly sentimental, is it, towards the whale?
Yeah,
it does
I
make me wonder what a rare whale steak tastes like.
yeah,
It
I want
must
you to
be quite
take this. I want you to take this whale steak into the kitchen, show it the fire, and then bring it back out to me.
Yeah,
That was quite a scene. Or yeah, but thinking about it, if you made the fat the right way, frying it real nice and sprinkling it with a heavy load of salt, whale fat could be delicious if you like fat or whale fat.
I couldn't even imagine what whale fat would taste like, to be honest.
My understanding is it's very, very heavy, which is why it produces such excellent oil.
Mm.
So one can almost basically treat it like lardo, if you're familiar with that. Basically, it's rendered fat that is spiced and salted, and basically cut into slices and eaten in, I think it's Italy.
Probably.
Could be.
I think it was back then. Nowadays we have an abundance of fat and calorie, but back then eating something like fat was a treat.
Yeah.
Mm.
My parents still talk that they used to eat rice with butter and sugar, which is to them was rare, because although having butter was a luxury.
Well, that actually sounds very tasty.
Well, yeah,
Butter is good on everything. Hello.
Yeah, butter's good. I can't imagine what sugar would do to it, but yeah.
Well,
butter.
if you know rice pudding, then you get into that direction. But
Yeah.
but then we have people from Indonesia in our country, and they said, "Do you know that you can actually fry the rice?" And you go like, "Oh, it's actually much nicer." So
Yeah.
A bit of fried rice.
So
Yeah. Butter is the good stuff. Screw the rest.
yeah, so never this good grease. So.
Okay, good. Then to the inspiration, or we touched on it before about for the story about Moby-Dick. Recently, there came out this book, which you see on the screen right hand side, In the Heart of the Sea, which is also the name of the new movie on Netflix, which is quite good. I can recommend it, about the story of the Essex, which I think Melville heard and turned it into Moby Dick, which is basically the story. The boat got rammed by a whale, and yeah, that's it. And there's a whale, I think a buckle whale, which is called Migalo, which is an albino whale. They actually exist, so there theoretically could be the possibility that way back there could be a white sperm whale, maybe not called Moby Dick, but yeah, there's some truth to stories like that, or could at least be possible. And on the other hand, some Simon yarns turned out to be true, like monster waves and the Kraken as well. So yeah, maybe there's more to the story than only being Simon's
Yeah, well,
yarn.
since satellite, pictures and stuff, they realise that these mega waves are actually far more common than anybody ever anticipated.
Yeah, if you ever went surfing, you could you can say there's so with with a higher frequency, there are bigger whales, not whales, waves, because a few times there come a few smallest ones, and compared to the other one, really big one, and it levels off, and this comes a few, every few waves. So yeah, you could infer it from this, but I guess not everybody goes surfing and or recognize this stuff.
Super.
Anything
Well,
else?
it's kind of inevitable when you talk about harmonics. As long as there's not a constant frequency, you're eventually going to have constructive and destructive interference with the wave patterns, and put enough waves of enough different frequencies together, and you're going to get one massive constructive interference pattern.
Yeah, just a few frequencies overlaying on top, and you have one big frequency. So yeah,
Super duper.
Yeah. Okay. On to the next books. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It will be in 2 weeks from now. On Monday from the Essay Club, we will do on the topic the lessons from Vietnam. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. Anything you guys wanted to add or say, get off your chest, something to that effect? Brandick?
It's an excellent book. Strongly recommend reading it. A heck of a lot better than many of the books we've read. Extremely, a very, very good example of period literature. I would recommend reading the narrative and skipping the nonfiction accounts if one is pressed for time. So one last thing that we didn't touch on was the interesting choice that Melville made to introduce some of the secondary characters towards the tail end of the book rather than at the beginning of the book. So the carpenter and the blacksmith come to mind, that they are rather important characters in the narrative, but they're not introduced until the last quarter or fifth of the book. So
yeah, there are quite a lot of characters, but they don't really add to the plot. They just do the roles, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like the preacher in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Quackhouse?
Yeah, so go and read it, and then read Android 200's Dream of Electric Sheep before the next one.
Bishop?
I can finally put this book in my bookcase and continue on the next book.
Yeah. No, yeah, in my opinion, it's a really book worth your time. It's really poetic written. Yeah, it's worth your time. It needs quite a time investment, but I think it's one of the best books I have written in a long time, or even if one of the best if you can look past the parts that go on forever. But
it did remind me a bit also of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where you just have sections where you read the encyclopedia. So about something relevant, although the Hitchhiker's Guide itself, the entries are absurd, but you have a story and then you have some exposition. And so yeah, you have probably, if you get the abridged version, then it's not that heavy on the exposition.
I have not read
procedural stuff is quite good in books, so I quite like it. If you learning about something as well as taking in the actual story, like Starship Troopers or something like that. You've got a lot of stuff in there about the procedural elements,
world building.
Yes, this book is excellent world building.
Helps you invest more in the story.
Yeah. Okay, I think this wraps up the stream about the book Moby-Dick. Yeah, thank you very much for listening, and see you in 2 weeks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later.